Just three key moments in today's reading. Again, it was a shorter passage or shorter section today, so we only have three key details to look at. We're going to talk about the witch trials and the view of justice that the court holds. We're going to look at Giles Corey and John Proctor and their response. They're both coming to the court. How do they respond and react to the events that are unfolding? And then finally, Governor Danforth. He presents a very striking statement at the end of the reading for today about the challenge that he is faced with in proving witchcraft in a court of law, right? Proving something supernatural in a legal court. So let's jump over to the text today. We're going to be in Act 3, obviously. And I want to point out just some subtle details about the circumstances surrounding these witch trials. Okay, first and foremost, this is in the Salem Meeting House, okay, which is now serving as the anteroom of the general court. Now, the meeting house for Puritans would have been the place of worship, right? That's where they would have gone to church. It's the same place that's happening. The church is the same place where we see this court taking place, which I think is an interesting symbolic reality, that the spiritual and the judicial are linked. There's no separation between the church and the state. And justice has a very specific procedure that should be followed, right? If we look on page 86, we see some of these procedural elements that are required of justice, right? So in the middle of page 86, Giles Corey has come to the court to defend his wife, his third wife, who has been accused of witchcraft and standing trial. Reverend Hale says Giles Corey, claims hard evidence for his wife's defense. I think that in all justice you must, Danforth interrupts Reverend Hale. Then let him submit his evidence in the proper affidavit. You are certainly aware of the procedure here, Mr. Hale. Now, an affidavit would be an official court document, right? So if I'm going to make a statement before a court, I would have to, under oath, submit an affidavit, which is a statement, or my under oath statement, that's being taken by a court-appointed individual. So it's all very proper and procedural, right? And so there is an element here that justice has a process, has a procedure. If you want to find it, you have to go through the steps. You have to kind of play the game, so to speak. Now, Danforth, besides hiding behind procedure, also hides behind his power and authority in other places. On page 87, we see that, right? He actually tells Judge Hathorne, you know who I am, right? You know who I am. You know who my authority. He's actually talking to Francis Nurse here. Sorry about that, but he's interrupting Hathorne. And do you know that near 400 are in the jails from Marblehead to Lynn upon my signature, and 72 condemned to hang by that signature? Right, the power that he holds in just the stroke of his pen to condemn a person to death, to have a person thrown in prison, right? And, Francis Nurse, I never thought to say such a weighty judge, but you were deceived, right? So yes, you have weight, you have authority, you have power. Finally, the way that Danforth views the court is also important here. I'm going to skip ahead to page 94 because he says a line that I think is so important we'll go back to here at the end of our discussion today. Okay, again, Francis Nurse and him are having a conversation, right? They are all covenanted Christians, sir. I'm sure they have nothing to fear, right? I've brought trouble on these people. I have. No, old man, you have not hurt people if they are of good conscience. But you must understand, sir, that a person is either with this court or immediately must be counted against it. There is no in between. This is a sharp time, a precise time. We no longer live in the dusky afternoon where evil mixed itself with good and befuddled the world, right? So what we have now is a very black and white time. You're either for us or you're against us. You're either with this court or you're against this court. There's no in between. This is a sharp time. And in many respects, this is a very extreme view of justice. Oftentimes, the truth and figuring out what is true in a case like this is a little murkier than that. But Danforth makes a very prominent statement about justice. Okay, let's skip to Giles Corey and John Proctor. Okay, these two men who come to the court because they have some evidence that they want to present. And they're not really welcome in the court initially. I'm going to switch to a different highlighter color for this. Right, so you can hear there's some testimony going on at the beginning of the act, and then Giles' voice and Danforth's voice are interrupting. Right, so Giles enters, right, I have evidence for the court. right? Danforth's like, get this guy out of here. You're hearing lies, lies. I have evidence. Will you not hear my evidence? Right? The door opens and Giles is half carried into the vestry room by Herrick. Right? He is adamant that he wants his evidence to be heard. And what we see here is that Proctor and Corey both think that a court of law, is a place where evidence should be presented. Now, Giles has a sworn statement, or at least a statement by several people in defense of his third wife. But Proctor brings a different type of evidence with him. He brings a person. He brings Mary Warren. And this was hinted at the very end of Act 2, at least the proper part of Act 2, right? Danforth starts questioning Mary Warren, right? Are they pretending? Aye, sir, they are, right? He is saying, at least Proctor is that what Mary Warren is going to swear to in court is that all of these girls were faking it. It was pretense, sir, she says. Right? So he uses Mary Warren's testimony as evidence, but he also uses reputation as evidence and a defense as evidence in defending the accused, in defending his wife and Rebecca Nurse and Mrs. Corey, these people who are proud Christian women who are well received and respected in the church, right? So you see that here, that these women have lived so long with such an upright reputation. Doesn't it strike you that so many of them have done that? And now all of a sudden, right, we're switching on them? Like, doesn't somebody's reputation and the history that they've had serve as some type of evidence, even in this court of law? Now, I would say that Reverend Parris here, but other characters like Danforth and Hathorne don't seem to be as persuaded by that. But Proctor continues, right? Not only should these women be listened to, but so should the testimony of the individuals that are on this document that we brought, right? So he hands Danforth on page 93 a piece of paper. Read it first. It's a sort of testament. These people signing it declare their good opinion of Rebecca and my wife and Martha Corey. Now Parris is like, their good opinion. He wants to dismiss it. And he says, no, these are all land-owning farmers, members of the church, right? They've known the women many years. They've never seen them with a dealing with the devil, right? They're land-owning farmers. They're members of the church. These people have positions. That Rebecca Nurse and Martha Corey and Elizabeth Proctor, they're not witches. And so the question becomes, if you're really paying attention to this clearly, is that when you have competing testimony, right? So in this case, you've got the testimony of all of these church members and farmers against the testimony of these young women, these girls, Abigail Williams and her posse, right? Who's to decide who's telling the truth? If everyone's voice is equal and it carries equal weight, how do we decide who's telling the truth? That is the challenge. That's the question sometimes within a democracy. If everybody has a voice, if everybody's voice is equal, then whose voice is right or wrong? And what's important is that Danforth even addresses this concern on page 100. So this longer paragraph at the very end of the section that you read for today, he brings up this very challenge, right? So he says, Mr. Hale, believe me, for a man of such terrible learning, you are most bewildered. I hope you will forgive me. I have been 32 years at the bar, sir, and I should be confounded were I called upon to defend these people, right? In an ordinary crime, how does one defend the accused? One calls witnesses to prove innocence. But witchcraft is what they call ipso facto, right? By its very nature, right? That's what ipso facto means. He defines it for us. On its face, by its nature, an invisible crime, is it not? Therefore, who may possibly be a witness of it? The witch and the victim, none other. So what Danforth is saying here is that the people who we are going to give the strongest authority to and strongest testimony to are the person who is the victim of witchcraft and then ultimately the witch themselves. Those are the only two who are really involved, who really have witnessed this crime. It doesn't matter what the people said who were farmers and landowners and members of the church, right, who were saying that, all these Christian women who are being accused, they're good people. That doesn't matter. Reputation doesn't matter as much in this case as the testimony. Now, can we allow this kind of accusation, this type of accusation in a just society, in a society that prides itself on justice? Can we really have our justice system based on my word against yours? Do you see the possible dangers that are there? if someone can, there's someone I can accuse of anything because I simply have a voice. Right? And that is the danger that I think Arthur Miller's really highlighting here. If everybody has a voice, then nobody has a voice. And so that leads us to the questions I want to just leave you with for today. How can we decide what is true? What evidence or testimony is valid and true? And as you finish up Act 3 on Thursday, I hope that you consider those questions. How can we decide what is true? All right, for that, I will leave you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.